"Get your black ass out of my seat, boy." Those were the first words Rebecca Palmer said as Darius Cole approached Seat 2A on Flight 932 from Seattle to D.C. Not hello, not excuse me, not even a question. Just that. Loud. Sharp. Designed to humiliate. Every eye in the first-class cabin turned. Some passengers gasped. Others pretended not to hear. A few phones tilted upward in quiet record mode. But no one said a word. Darius, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a fitted gray hoodie and clean black jeans, froze in the narrow aisle. His boarding pass was still in his hand. It clearly said 2A. He looked at it once, then at the woman who had just shoved his bag aside and claimed the seat like a throne she'd always owned. Rebecca, dressed in a pristine white pantsuit, diamonds on both wrists, crossed her legs slowly, claiming the armrests with practiced ease. Her voice was now sugar-sweet, dripping with entitlement. "You people always try to sneak into places you don't belong." The air went still. The tension was thick enough to slice. Darius didn't respond. He didn't need to. His expression was unreadable, calm, focused. But behind his eyes, something was watching, measuring. A flight attendant appeared, Chloe Simmons, mid-20s, blonde ponytail, anxious smile. She looked at Rebecca, then at Darius, and just like that, made a decision. "Sir, I think you're in the wrong section. Economy is behind you." Darius offered the boarding pass. Chloe didn't look at it. "Please move. Now." That's when a teenager 2 rows back started streaming on TikTok. The video would be titled, "When a Black CEO Gets Kicked Out of His Own Seat." Within the hour, it would become a trending black story, watched by hundreds of thousands. But at this moment, Darius just stood there, silent, processing. If this moment makes your blood boil, then you're exactly who this story is for. This is not just a flight. It's a mirror. And what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about power, perception, and race in America. Stay with us. Watch till the end. Some stories need to be seen to be believed. Rebecca didn't flinch. She leaned back in the plush leather seat like it was made for her and her alone. "Some people need to learn their place," she muttered, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Chloe, the flight attendant, still hadn't looked at Darius's boarding pass. She stood tall now, using her presence like a barrier between him and the seat he paid for. "Sir, I'll ask one more time," she said, her tone clipped, professional only in the technical sense. "Please find your assigned seat in the back." A few rows down, another passenger adjusted his earbuds, pretending to sleep. A woman in seat 1D turned to the window, her reflection catching her eye, and the shame she wasn't brave enough to confront. Darius remained calm. "Ma'am," he said gently, holding the pass up again. "This is my assigned seat, 2A. Darius Cole. Check your manifest." Chloe waved a hand, not even pretending to be interested. "I don't have time for games," she snapped. "You can't just walk into first class because you feel like it." From her throne in 2A, Rebecca added, "Honestly, it's a disgrace. I've been Platinum Elite for 12 years. I've flown this route more times than I can count." "You heard the lady," Chloe said, folding her arms. "She's a loyal customer. I'm sure she's right." The bias wasn't new. It was polished, practiced, systemic. Rebecca reached into her Chanel bag and pulled out her Delta app. "See? Right here. Seat 2A. Told you." She held the screen up like a badge of honor. Chloe nodded without checking Darius's pass again. Behind them, a girl named Sophia tapped her phone screen. She was 16, headed to visit colleges with her dad. She had just started streaming live on TikTok a few minutes ago, and now, her viewer count had doubled. "This is wild," Sophia whispered to her phone. "They won't even check the guy's boarding pass. Just because he's black and wearing a hoodie." Darius looked around the cabin. No one intervened. No one said a word. He could feel the heat rising in his chest. Not anger, but history. The long weight of generations pushed into this single moment. This was not the first time. It would not be the last. Unless something changed. Unless someone made it change. And Darius Cole wasn't just someone. Darius didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice, didn't plead, didn't demand. He simply stood there, tall, composed, holding his boarding pass like it was a shield no one cared to read. The silence was deafening. To some, it looked like surrender. To others, it looked like restraint. But to anyone paying attention, it was a choice. A decision to not become the angry black man they were all waiting to see. Rebecca rolled her eyes. Well, are you just going to stand there all day? We've got places to be. Chloe let out an exaggerated sigh, folding her arms. We're about to close the cabin doors. Either you move to economy or security will be called. Still, Darius didn't move. Instead, he looked at Rebecca, then at Chloe. Not with fear, not with frustration, but with something far more unsettling, certainty. His silence was power, and power makes people uncomfortable. The air in first class had shifted. There was a tension now, thick and sticky, like heat before a thunderstorm. Phones were recording. Eyes were watching. And still, no one spoke up. Row 3, Seat B, a man in a suit, typing on his laptop just moments ago, froze mid-keystroke. He looked up, blinked, then looked away. A woman scrolling on her phone 2 rows back locked eyes with Darius for half a second, then turned back to her Instagram feed. Sophia's TikTok stream passed 12,000 viewers. Comments flooded in like a tidal wave. He's literally showing them the ticket. Can't believe this is happening. This is racism, clear as day. Still, Darius said nothing. And that silence, it screamed louder than any words could. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably, suddenly unsure of herself. What, cat got your tongue? She scoffed. At least say something if you're going to play the victim. Chloe smirked. Typical. Always making a scene without saying a word. But it wasn't a scene. It was a reckoning. Darius looked down at his watch. The minute hand ticked forward. Still calm. Still silent. He could have shouted. He could have made a scene, forced compliance, called for authority. Instead, he let them write the story themselves. With every assumption, every biased glance, every careless word. And they were writing it well. The only thing they didn't know was who they were writing it about. By the time the gate agent closed the cabin door, Sophia's live stream had already crossed 18,000 viewers. She didn't plan on going viral. At first, it was just instinct. She opened TikTok the way most teens breathe, effortlessly, without thinking. But what started as a clip of awkward in-flight tension had become something else entirely. The comments came in fast, faster than she could read. Are they really doing this to him? Why won't she check his boarding pass? First class Karen strikes again. People weren't just watching. They were angry, connected, activated. Sophia adjusted her phone slightly, framing Darius and Rebecca in the same shot. The contrast was striking. A calm, composed black man holding his pass. A white woman lounging like royalty, full of entitlement and venom. Down in the terminal, 2 college students waiting for a different flight noticed the stream. One of them was majoring in sociology. He hit screen record immediately. On another phone, a flight attendant in the crew lounge watching during her break whispered, "Oh no. That's Orion Air." She recognized the uniform. She recognized the mistake. A high school teacher on her lunch break shared the video to her Facebook group. Teaching tolerance? Show your students this. Within 20 minutes, #BlackFlyer and #OrionBias were trending. Influencers picked it up. Activists reshared it. Civil rights attorneys commented live. Watch this man's silence. It's strategic. It's dignified. And it's the most powerful protest I've seen all year. A former airline exec reposted with a single line, "Who trained this crew?" Darius hadn't moved. He didn't know how viral it had become. He hadn't seen the clips being shared, the duets, the reactions, the Twitter threads dissecting every word Chloe and Rebecca had said. But he knew. He could feel it. Not the cameras. Not the heat. But the shift. The story was no longer just his. It belonged to everyone watching. To every passenger ever looked at twice. To every black man who got asked if he was lost when he stood in first class. To everyone who sat silently because they knew speaking would only make it worse. And now, the silence was broken. But not by Darius. By the world watching him. Darius finally moved, but not toward the back. He reached slowly into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out his phone. The screen lit up with a soft glow, the familiar red and silver logo of Orion Air shining at the top. Rebecca leaned back with a smug grin. "Let me guess, calling your girlfriend to come save you?" Chloe chuckled, arms still crossed. "Or maybe customer service. That should go well." Darius said nothing. His fingers glided across the screen with quiet certainty. This wasn't the panicked scroll of someone searching for help. This was methodical, purposeful. He tapped the icon labeled Executive Access. A new interface appeared, one no average passenger had ever seen. Layers of authorization menus, status dashboards, internal systems. The background was jet black. The text, clean, precise, corporate. At the top of the screen, in bold letters, "Welcome, Darius Cole, CEO." Sophia gasped quietly behind her phone. She had zoomed in. Her TikTok live stream exploded. "He's the CEO. Oh my God. No way." Rebecca blinked. Her smirk froze mid-formation. "Excuse me, what is that?" Darius turned the screen toward her for a second, just long enough. Her smile died. "That's fake. That has to be fake." But her voice cracked. Chloe stepped forward, unsure now. "Sue, what exactly are you showing us?" Darius looked up for the first time in minutes. "I'm showing you your boss." It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. But somehow, the words hit like thunder. The tension broke, but not the way anyone expected. Chloe's confidence drained from her face. She looked like a student realizing she just insulted her professor, on camera. Rebecca opened her mouth, then closed it. Her brain raced, searching for logic, for a way to make this not real. Her eyes darted to the app, to the name, to the title, to the access codes. Her body went still. The cabin was quiet now. The phones were still recording. But the story had changed. Darius didn't just belong in first class. He owned it. And this was only the beginning. For the first time since this started, Rebecca was quiet. She stared at the screen like it had betrayed her. Like reality itself had rewritten the script she thought she was in charge of. This was supposed to be her moment. The platinum frequent flyer, the elite customer, the woman who knew the system. But the system had just spoken back. And it belonged to the man she tried to erase. Darius didn't move. He didn't smirk. He didn't gloat. He simply turned the screen toward the crew. "Check your internal roster," he said calmly. "Executive profiles. Authorization number DC 001. Chloe hesitated. Her voice, once so full of command, now trembled with doubt. "Sir, I didn't realize." "You didn't want to realize," Darius replied, his tone still even. "You didn't ask for proof. You just decided I didn't belong." Jacob Monroe, the lead flight attendant, arrived from the galley, clearly unaware of what had just happened. "What's the holdup in first class?" he asked, voice firm. Chloe turned to him quickly. "Jacob, he says he's." "I'm Darius Cole," Darius said, cutting clean through the tension. "Chief Executive Officer of Orion Air." Jacob blinked. Darius raised the phone again. Would you like to see the board dashboard? Or the direct reports list? Or maybe the founding documents? Sophia's live stream viewer count passed 85,000. Rebecca finally spoke, her voice hollow. You're the CEO? Darius nodded once. That's not possible. I mean, look at you. The words slipped out before she could stop them. And once they were in the air, there was no taking them back. Everyone heard it. Jacob looked at her. Then at Darius. Then at the sea of phones recording every second. Darius didn't respond to her comment. He didn't need to. Reality had already done the talking. And now, it was doing the reckoning. This seat, Darius said, tapping the leather headrest, is reserved for Orion's CEO on every domestic flight. It's in the system. But that's not really the issue here. Rebecca looked down, suddenly unsure of her entire identity. Darius's eyes met Jacob's. I suggest you notify the captain. Tell him who's on board. The roles had flipped. The silence had changed. And power, the real kind, was no longer a question. It was in the seat. It was in the room. And everyone knew it. The cabin door opened with a soft click, followed by the unmistakable sound of heavy boots on the jet bridge. 2 airport security officers stepped into the aircraft. One was a tall black man in his 40s with a calm, controlled demeanor. His badge read Officer Jamal Grant. The other, a composed Asian woman with sharp eyes and clipped tone, wore a name tag that read Detective Rachel Tanaka. Jacob met them at the front of the cabin, still trying to keep a lid on the fire that had already gone viral. Officers, thank you. We have a passenger refusing to move to his assigned seat. Tanaka raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Jacob pointed toward Darius. Yes, that gentleman. He insists on sitting in first class even though he clearly doesn't. Have you verified his boarding pass? Tanaka interrupted. Jacob hesitated. Well, no, but. You assumed, Officer Grant said flatly. Tanaka stepped forward. Her eyes locked onto Darius, who remained seated now, relaxed but alert. Sir, may I see your boarding pass, please? Her voice was neutral, professional. Darius handed it to her without a word. Tanaka scanned it, then looked up. Seat 2A. Confirmed. Then she spotted something else, the phone still resting on Darius's lap. The screen was still open, still displaying the executive dashboard. She leaned in slightly. Her voice dropped. Is this? Yes, Darius replied. I'm Darius Cole, CEO. Tanaka blinked, then nodded. She turned to her partner. We need to document this. Immediately. Behind them, Jacob's mouth opened, but no words came out. Officer Grant turned toward the crew and the surrounding passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We are now conducting a formal report on a potential discrimination incident. The word hit the cabin like a bolt of electricity. Discrimination. Rebecca paled. Chloe instinctively stepped back. Jacob lowered his eyes. Sophia's live stream crossed 120,000 viewers. Darius sat quietly as Tanaka snapped a photo of the boarding pass, then the screen. Grant asked for the names of the involved crew members. Rebecca finally spoke, desperate to salvage control. Officers, I've flown this airline for years. I'm a diamond platinum. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, Tanaka replied without turning. You just wanted to be right. The authority was here now. But it hadn't come to protect the powerful. It had come to record the truth. Detective Rachel Tanaka stood beside Officer Grant, flipping her notebook closed with quiet precision. Her voice was calm, but her words had weight. Mr. Cole, we're documenting this as a formal discrimination incident involving Orion Air staff and one passenger. Do you wish to press charges at this time? Darius didn't answer right away. The silence made the question louder. He looked around the cabin, at the faces, at the eyes that were now fixed on him, Not with skepticism, but with realization. With shame. "I'm not here for arrests," Darius said finally. "I'm here for accountability." He tapped his phone again, pulling up a different screen, one labeled legal and policy. Then, he made a call. "Put me through to Orion Air General Counsel." The phone rang once. "This is Sylvia Jenkins." "Sylvia, this is Darius Cole. I need you to initiate an internal compliance report. Flight 932. Seattle to DC. There's been a confirmed bias incident. I want the full legal documentation drafted before wheels up." "Yes, sir. Do you want external counsel involved?" "Not yet. But alert the PR crisis team. We may need full transparency within the hour." Passengers blinked. It wasn't just a viral moment anymore. It was an executive response, real, swift, irreversible. Chloe took a step forward, her voice low, shaking. "Mr. Cole, I didn't mean to." "But you did," Darius interrupted, gently but firmly. "You looked at me and made a decision. You refused to verify facts. You dismissed me without asking a single question." She tried to speak again, but couldn't. Jacob followed. "Sir, please. If we had known." Darius stood now. He wasn't angry. He didn't need to be. "You didn't care to know," he said. "That's the problem." Rebecca sat frozen in seat 2A, still gripping the armrests like they were anchors in a storm she could no longer control. "Miss Palmer," Darius said calmly, "you didn't just disrespect a passenger. You tried to erase a person. Based on appearance. Based on comfort. Based on your own expectations of who belongs where." She looked down, unable to meet his gaze. Sophia's livestream hit 150,000 viewers. "Every decision you made," Darius continued, "was recorded. Every assumption, every word. And now, every consequence will follow." Officer Grant took a deep breath. "Mr. Cole, we're ready to file this report." Darius nodded. "Do it." The truth had been spoken. Now came the consequences. By the time the aircraft began its taxi toward the runway, the outside world had already caught fire. Sophia's livestream passed 200,000 viewers. Hashtags flooded timelines. Hashtag Darius Cole, hashtag Seat2A, hashtag Orion Bias, and hashtag Flying While Black were trending simultaneously across platforms. TikTok, Twitter, Instagram Reels, all pulsing with the same story from different angles. Videos stitched. Reactions posted. Screenshots with timestamps. Freeze frames of Chloe's dismissive posture, of Rebecca's smirk, of Darius holding up the boarding pass no one wanted to see. The story had fractured into thousands of digital voices, and yet every single one repeated the same truth. This man was judged before he was heard. This is what racism looks like in a suit and smile. He owned the airline, and they still told him he didn't belong. Newsrooms scrambled. Editors yelled across desks. Notifications lit up phones in boardrooms. At Orion Air headquarters in Atlanta, the PR team's group chat turned from emojis to full-blown crisis mode in less than 3 minutes. CNN picked it up. So did MSNBC, NBC, BuzzFeed, and The Washington Post. Trending topics were no longer just entertainment. They were indictments. Live on air, a civil rights attorney said it best. What we saw here was not a mistake. It was a pattern. A system in real time. Meanwhile, influencers with massive followings were reposting Sophia's footage. Some stitched their own messages onto the end. "I fly Orion. Not anymore. I was in first class once. They stared at me the same way." One retired flight captain tweeted, "There is no training manual that tells you to ignore a boarding pass." That was bias. Period. The stock market hadn't even opened yet, but financial analysts were already forecasting turbulence. And all the while, Darius sat quietly in his seat. Not as a passenger. Not even as a CEO, but as a symbol. His face now represented a question America couldn't keep ignoring. Who decides who belongs? Rebecca stared out the window, but there was nothing out there to escape into. Chloe sat pale and frozen, the magnitude of what had unfolded finally settling into her bones. And Jacob paced in the galley, trying to remember when, exactly, everything had gone wrong. It wasn't just the internet. It was the mirror it held up. And no one could look away. When the flight reached cruising altitude, the silence inside the cabin was no longer about shock. It was about fallout. Officer Tanaka had taken full statements. Officer Grant had submitted the preliminary report to both the airport and the FAA. Now, all that remained was consequence. And it started with Chloe. She approached Darius slowly, like a student walking toward a principal's desk after failing a test she didn't know she was taking. "Mr. Cole," she began, voice trembling. I want to apologize." Darius looked up, calm as ever. "Is this your first time assuming someone's not who they say they are?" She swallowed. "No. Then it's not a mistake," he replied. "It's a pattern. And patterns have consequences." She said nothing more. Darius tapped his phone again. The HR department at Orion had already submitted a draft of disciplinary measures. Chloe Simmons, 6-month unpaid suspension, mandatory anti-bias training, psychological evaluation prior to reinstatement. Final warning status upon return. She read the email over his shoulder. Tears welled in her eyes. "I can learn," she whispered. "Then start with listening," Darius replied. Jacob Monroe's turn came next. As lead flight attendant, he carried additional responsibility, both in protocol and in precedent. His disciplinary order was firm: immediate demotion to support staff, 20% salary reduction, and a 2-year probationary period under direct supervision. When he read it, he looked up, stunned. "Sir, I've worked here 12 years. I've trained half this crew." Darius nodded. "Then you trained them wrong." Jacob nodded slowly. "You're right." In the middle of all of it sat Rebecca Palmer. She hadn't moved. But her phone had. Someone from her own company had texted her. A screenshot of Sophia's video. A headline from The Atlantic: "Marketing executive caught in first-class meltdown after humiliating black CEO." And then the next message: "Call HR. Immediately." Her hands shook as she opened her LinkedIn profile. Hundreds of comments. Thousands of reposts. Her carefully crafted image vanished in less than an hour. She looked at Darius with tears forming. "Please, don't ruin my life." Darius stared at her, unblinking. "I didn't ruin anything," he said. "You did." She broke down quietly as the consequences landed, not as punishment, but as a reflection of who she had chosen to be when she thought no one was watching. But everyone was. Darius didn't speak for applause. He never raised his voice. Never demanded attention. But when he stood, the cabin listened. He didn't just stand as a man wronged. He stood as a man in power, and in purpose. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice steady, calm and clear. "I want to apologize." Heads turned. Not out of confusion, but because no one expected that sentence. "I want to apologize that this kind of thing still happens. That a man like me, anyone who looks like me, can be presumed out of place in a seat he paid for, on an airline he runs." The room was silent. "No company is perfect," he continued. "But the difference between excuses and integrity is what happens next." He pulled out his phone again, tapped the Orion Air app, and opened the executive policy dashboard. "Effective immediately," Darius said, "Orion Air is launching a new company-wide protocol, one that goes beyond reactive training." He looked around the cabin, letting the weight of his words land. "We call it the Dignity Program." A few passengers nodded. A few crew members froze. Every customer-facing employee, from ticket counter to pilot, will be required to complete quarterly anti-bias training, he said. "Not once. Every quarter. He continued, unwavering. All aircraft will be fitted with body camera devices for flight crew. Every passenger interaction involving conflict will be recorded and reviewed independently. The impact was instant. Even those who had been silent felt the ground shifting under them. Additionally, he said, we are allocating $40 million annually to bias prevention, employee education, and third-party audits. Not marketing. Not PR. Real change. The crew shifted in their positions. Some embarrassed. Some inspired. All silent. We can't control what people assume when they look at someone, Darius added, but we can make sure that those assumptions don't cost someone their dignity. He turned toward the back of the cabin. And we're not starting next year. We're starting now. Sophia's livestream surged past 250,000 viewers. One comment echoed louder than the rest. This is what leadership looks like. Darius didn't smile. He didn't need to. He wasn't there to impress. He was there to change something. And he just had. The plane touched down just before 6 p.m. There was no applause, no dramatic music. Just the usual jolt of rubber on asphalt and a quiet hum of jet engines slowing to stillness. But everything had changed. Chloe, once the first to speak, remained silent as she helped passengers gather their things. Her eyes were different now, not just ashamed, but open. She had started the journey assuming she understood people. She ended it knowing she had a lot to learn. 3 weeks later, she would complete her suspension and return, not as a flight attendant, but as a facilitator for Orion Air's new bias prevention training. And not because she was forced to, because she asked to. Jacob would step back from leadership and instead join a newly formed feedback program, his experience now used to build bridges rather than break trust. And Rebecca Palmer? She would leave her job within the month. Not because she was fired, but because she could no longer pretend to be someone she wasn't. She began volunteering at a community justice center in D.C. where no one cared about her miles or status, only her willingness to show up and serve. And Darius? He returned to seat 2A a month later. Different route. Different crew. Same purpose. This time, no one questioned his presence. Not because of who he was, but because of what had changed. Respect didn't flow from a title. It grew from culture. From leadership that didn't just punish ignorance, but replaced it with understanding. Darius once said, change doesn't happen because you talk about fairness. It happens because you operationalize it. And he did. Across the airline industry, new programs were launched. Training rewritten. Cameras installed. Passenger experience redefined. One viral moment had become the blueprint for a movement. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or judged before you spoke, you already understand what this story was really about. It's not just about a seat. It's about how easily we confuse comfort with correctness, and how often we treat dignity like a privilege, when in truth, it's a human right. If this story moved you, share it. Talk about it. Reflect on it. Because someone on your next flight, in your office, in your daily routine, needs to know that people do change. And that justice isn't loud. It's quiet. Until it isn't. This has been a Black story. And maybe now, it's your story too.